Okay, today we'll be talking about reproduction in humans. And in this case, right, there is two segments to this reproduction in human. The first one is talking about the male and female reproductive organs, as well as the process of the menstrual cycle. Next, the second part, which we'll do in another video, is what are the sexual transmitted disease and how can one protect themselves from these sexually transmitted infections. So now let's start. So for reproduction, all living things has the ability to be able to ensure life continuity. The meaning of life continuity means that there is no form of what we call there is basically you are able to survive and continue your human species lah until as a result and leading to no form of extinction. So this process of reproduction, right, is actually a point whereby it's a biological process where all the new individuals from living organisms are able to be produced. And there are generally two methods of reproduction. The first one is asexual reproduction, and the second one is sexual reproduction. Now, this is another common exam question that can be asked, but it's more seen at the Sec 3, Sec 4, or mainly Sec 4. Okay, so what is it like? So for asexual reproduction, the meaning A means it involves only one particular parent, as compared to the other one, which actually it involves two parent, and these two parent must be of the opposite uh, sex. Okay, in which one is a male and one is a female. Now, the reason for this is because the male will help to contribute the male sexual cell, whereas for the female, they will contribute the female sexual cell. And when the process of the male and the female sexual cells combine together, in this case for humans, it's the sperm, for the female, it's the ovum. This process is what we call fertilization, leading to the production of the zygote. This zygote is the first primary cell where where the male sperm cell and the female ovum has actually combined into one. Only then, after the zygote has slowly developed and multiplied, then it forms either the fetus or the baby. Asexual reproduction is where they don't really involve other types of parents, just only one single parent, and this is something like cell cloning lah. Okay, in upper sec, there's one process, or even in JC, we'll learn this process is what we call mitosis. Okay, in this case, the process of fertilization does not actually take place due to it actually having no gametes being involved, and that these new cells are usually produced from the parent cell by either simple cell division. So an example is like when you receive a cut on your hand, your cell will regenerate, correct or not? And in that case, right, it's in a way undergoing also some form of asexual reproduction through mitosis for self growth, because you do not want to have another variation of cell of you to heal your wound. Now let's talk about the male reproductive system. For the male reproductive system, it can be done through a side view or a frontal view. In your textbook, they have the front view. So in this case, right, what happens is from the side view, right, you will see that there are a few key indicators. In exam, how is it done is you might be asked, right, where all these labels are actually missing, and you'll be asked to label some of these parts. So in this case, how is it color coded is that the one in yellow, this represents the urinary bladder. So what the urinary bladder does is it actually stores the urine. Okay, so that's one. Second thing is you have the seminal vesicles. The seminal vesicle is the one that will be able to actually um, secrete some of your nutrients and what's not, right, for your sperm and things like this lah. Same thing with the epithemis. Now the scrotum wise is whereby it's actually a sac. It's like a ball sac that helps to situate or protect the testis, such that this particular so that the testis is actually not found within your body, but in a way on an external part of your body. Now, I know this sounds controversial in the sense that it is still part of your body. It's just that it is not closely embedded inside your body lah. It's still like hanging outside. Now the reason for this is because of the temperature of your body. So the temperature of your body is somewhere about 37 degrees Celsius, and this can be quite harmful towards sperm growth or sperm production. Okay, so that's why it tends to be situated outside. Then of course you have the penis to help to facilitate ejaculation or the transfer of the sperm to the female body. And then you have the urethra. The urethra is quite unique here in the sense that it's the same passageway for both urine as well as your semen to come up. Okay, and then lastly you have the sperm duct. The sperm duct is the one that would actually transport the sperm out from the testes. Okay, but then do take note that the sperm itself is not, it's just basically some sperm cells. It has to be combined with other forms of enzyme or maybe nutrition. That's why it forms as a semen. Okay. So one follow up from this is that in exam, right, they may actually ask you to label. After the labeling, they'll ask you what's the function. So common functions are the ones highlighted in orange, where the testes will help to produce sperm, and of course your male sex hormone called the testosterone. So testosterone is the one that gives the person the male characteristics. Okay, so examples are like your voice will deepen, more muscular features, things like this. Whereas for the urethra, it transports both the urine out, as well as the semen out of the penis. The scrotum is really just holding the testes outside of the body. Sperm duct will generally transport sperm to the penis. The seminal vesicles is the one that produces fluid that mixes with the sperm to form the semen, and the epidermis, the epidermis is the one that will store the sperm. Okay, so sperms tend to develop slightly better through the body temperature. So this one is what we have discussed just now, such that the sperms are usually held outside the scrotum of the body. And this fluid that is produced by the seminal vesicles helps to actually contains the nutrients as well as the lubricating effect to help the sperm to move better. And this mixture is what we call the semen. So here is the frontal view of the female reproductive system. Again, in exam, you might be required to label, and not just to label, but also um, to be able to tell the function of that particular portion. So the thing about the female reproductive system, they are actually symmetrical, in which the left side is somewhat similar to the right side. Okay, so in the sense that you actually have two ovaries, and that what will help transport the ovary, which is the female sex cells, to the uterus for fertilization, right, is the fallopian tube. Or another word for it in some textbook, they will call it the oviduct. Now, fertilization occurs only around this area or sometimes over here, along the sides of the fallopian tube. Fertilizations do not occur after the cervix. Okay, so do take note that the cervix and the vagina are also two separate things. Do not label this part as the cervix, which is commonly done in exams for students. Okay, so what happens is, for the uterus, right, it's basically this organ that allows implantation of the embryo and the growth of the fetus. One note to take note is this is embryo, not the zygote. So the zygote generally is being fertilized over at the fallopian tube. So in a sense that the sperm will travel upwards to the fallopian tube, or the egg and at the same time meeting the egg there. The fallopian tube has the main function is really to transport the eggs from the ovary to the uterus. And in the process of, let's say, sexual intercourse or what's not, then it will lead to that level of fertilization. Next is the cervix, which is this narrow opening of the uterus, which will then become wider during birth process. And that for ovary, they tend to produce eggs, okay, in which the female sex hormone, which we call estrogen, and progesterone. So just like the male portion of the testes where we produce the sperm as well as the testosterone, the female will also produce the egg as well, or the ova, and it will generally produce the female sex hormone, which is estrogen and progesterone, that gives you the female characteristics. Then the vagina is basically this muscular passage that connects to the uterus, allowing the deposition of sperm. Next, we look at the comparison between a sperm and an ovum. This one rarely comes out in exam, but it's good to know lah. Okay. So what happens is you can see that for a sperm, right? This is only for a human one, huh? Um, the sperm will actually have three main section: the head, the middle piece, and the tail. Where the head will contain the nucleus. So the nucleus is essential in being able to carry the genetic information so that the information can be passed on to the next generation. Okay, the middle piece is the one that will contain a lot of mitochondria. So this mitochondria over here, right, will help to propel energy for the sperm to actually move to survive. Whereas the tail here helps the sperm to actually move about. So in this case, right, what we can see is with these features, the sperm is able to move on its own with the help of the tail. The nucleus is located in the head segment. The nucleus will also contain 23 chromosomes and about 2 million of the sperms per ejaculation. Next is that for this particular female's portion, right? The nucleus, the ovum contains really just the nucleus and that it cannot move on its own. These nucleus are located in the cell. The nucleus will contain 23 chromosomes in which only one egg is released every 28-day cycle. Fertilization. So fertilization is the fusion of this nuclei of a sperm and an egg to form a fertilized egg, what which we call actually the zygote. And during sexual intercourse, the penis is actually placed inside a female's vagina to deposit the sperm. So what will happen is that only one sperm is able to fertilize the egg, and hence it is able to from that onwards, right? It will form the zygote, and from the zygote it will slowly um, duplicate to form the embryo, leading to maybe implantation of the egg. So this egg is then now fertilized to form the zygote containing 23 pairs of chromosome. So in exam, this process you will have to be able to articulate or write down if they ask you to describe the fertilization process. Usually this one will carry quite a lot of marks. Okay, as a zygote contains both the parent's chromosome, the baby will actually inherit the characteristics from both, which we call the heredity, and that the zygote will continue to start to travel down to the uterus. During this journey, it will begin to divide itself to form a ball of cells, which we call the embryo. These ball of cells will then take about 7 days to reach the uterus, and subsequently in the uterus, the embryo will implant itself onto the lining of the uterus. Now, do take note that this lining has to be thick enough to be able to support the embryo, and this is something that we will learn more about in the chapter or in the portion of menstrual cycle. So, if let's say the the egg is not fertilized, and what will happen is this egg will actually not being implanted, and eventually it will be like cast out of the body lah. Okay. After a few months, the embryo will then develop into a fetus, through which it will become an unborn baby. And there was actually finger-like projections inside the uterus, which forms the placenta. These finger-like projections, right, tends to increase the surface area to volume ratio for all the nutrients to be transferred between the fetus and the mother. Okay, and that the umbilical cord will join the fetus to the placenta, and in this placenta, the fetus blood and the mother's blood do not mix. Why? Because the blood group for the mother and the baby might be different, and if let's say you have two different blood groups, if they mix, right, both can be dangerous to both parents and the kid lah. Okay, so the placenta helps to play an important role in the development of the fetus such that it helps to provide nutrients and oxygen to the fetus, but more importantly, to also remove your waste substance and carbon dioxide from the fetus. An example is like we go to the toilet to excrete out, but then in the child, you are still producing shit. But how does it get removed? This waste product is being removed um, through the umbilical cord lah. I mean the placenta lah. Okay. And lastly, the fetus will then slowly be developed into a baby after 9 months. So for puberty, right, this is the other part which usually comes out in MCQ lah. In which for puberty, what's so special about puberty, right, is this process or this period of time where the body will change and the reproductive system will start to actually develop fully. So for girls, puberty tends to occur between age 10 to 12, whereas for boys, puberty tends to happen later, which is 12 to 14. But more importantly, you will need to know how to distinct the difference between puberty for both the female as well as the male. So the first part is the production of your sex hormone. However, the difference is that for the male, you produce your sperm. For the female, you produce the ovum. Next is what are the other kinds? So like for example, for the male, your voice can deepen. You don't see the females actually deepen their voice. Actually, their voice are quite higher in pitch as compared to the male. And then next is the beginning of the menstrual cycle only for the female. For the male, we don't undergo any form of menstrual cycle. Then next, breast development in the female, as well as the widening of hips. So these are examples to help prepare the female for childbirth. As compared to the male, you will see that there is more facial and body hair as well as muscle development. Now, one commonality between both of these is that your sexual organs tends to become larger and there'll be growth spurt, means you suddenly grow taller. Okay. Over here for the menstrual cycle, my suggestion to you is please pay very close attention to this because this is a commonly asked exam question. How can this be represented? It can be represented through a calendar. They give you a calendar and they ask you to count which day is the ovulation, which day is the menstrual cycle starting. And then they can even ask you the follow-up question where to describe the menstrual cycle at this particular point in time. And should, let's say, fertilization does not occur, what will happen? If fertilization occurs, what will happen? They may even, for the more challenging kind of questions, they will actually draw out a graph representing the thickness of the uterus lining, and in this case, you must be able to infer the period at which menstruation occurs. Okay, so the menstruation is actually the woman's monthly bleeding, commonly known as the period, and that ovulation, which is a key definition they usually ask, is generally the release of a mature egg from one of the ovary from into the fallopian tube during the fertile period. And each of these cycle lasts for 28 days. But one caveat for this is that you need to know that not all women will have the menstrual cycle on the 28th day. Some can stretch, some can be shorter. And this depends on a few factors, for example, stress, for example, hormonal count on that day. So there are sometimes smoking or vaccination may also influence lah, but it's more towards of things that are related to hormones adjustment. So in a nutshell, for the first 5 days, we will see that the thickening. So when to start the first day, right, is when the first day you see the sign of blood bleeding lah. Okay. So the thickness. So on the first 5 days, what happened is that the lining, right, the thickened lining of the uterus tends to shed if fertilization does not occur. And this discharge will be through the vagina with the blood, and therefore that's the indication of the start of the menstrual cycle. The lining of the uterus will start to repair and thicken due to the effects of the estrogen. Okay, so that's the first hormone. So the purpose of this hormone, right, helps to repair and thicken the uterus lining. So in this case, it's like a construction work. It's like a construction builder where they take new things and then they start building onto it. Okay, whereas for day 12 to 17, this is the fertile period where if the couple has any form of sexual intercourse, there's a higher chance that it will actually lead to pregnancy. Okay, it's not confirmed or hit. It really depends on the factors. And in this case, the lining of the uterus will then continue to grow and thicken. But more importantly, on day 14 of the whole cycle, the mature egg will be released, and this is what we call ovulation. The mature egg being released is only happening at the ovary, and this alternates. Due to the effect of progesterone, which is the second hormone, the lining of the uterus will continue to thicken and to be prepared for implantation. But do take note for progesterone, right? They do not actually build the lining. Instead, they are there to help to maintain and sustain the thickness of the uterus lining. Okay, and if there is no fertilization, the lining will start to break down due to the decrease in the progesterone, and hence a new menstrual cycle will start. So this whole cycle will repeat again. So for the chemical hormones, right, that plays an important role, they are your progesterone and estrogen. Okay, they are usually released at the ovary. One exam question that they may ask is what's the role lah? So for estrogen, just remember it builds and maintains, whereas for progesterone, it mainly maintains. Okay, so this is an example of how the graph can look like. Well, you can see, right, in terms of the thickness of the uterus lining, when estrogen level is low, there is a decrease in the thickness of the uterus lining because estrogen mainly helps to maintain and to grow. So at the first 5 days, progesterone is not injected in. Then slowly, when estrogen starts to increase, you will see that the uterus lining of the wall tends to increase also until a certain point. After that, it decreases. Okay, why it decreases is due to ovulation. But then what will happen is, why is it still maintaining at the high kind of environment here? Is because of the other hormone, which is progesterone. Progesterone is there to help maintain this portion, even though estrogen is low. So this is the part. Okay, you could see that after ovulation, progesterone is the one that comes in, therefore the lining starts to increase even when there is no estrogen. So that's where the key difference between estrogen and progesterone is at, where one starts to build and maintain, while the other one, which is the progesterone, only serves to maintain. And with that, that comes to the end of this particular section. Do review the video, and thank you.